Hello, everyone. I'm really happy to be here today with you all in Alu. The trip and the journey has been fantastic so far, and I'd like to thank Yulia and Natalie for the invitation and for giving me the opportunity to say a few words about the Swiss Museum of Games and to talk about play, since play is the theme of this year's AVARA event. So I'll be talking about play, and I'll be trying to give a sense of the meaning of the word play, at least as I understand it, and saying a few words about the Swiss Museum of Games. And I'd like to start by saying that play is a difficult notion to define. So it's notoriously difficult to define play because play can refer to a wide variety of things, right? Play can refer to a child's activity of free play. It can refer to acting, to playing music, to a structured activity of playing a rule-based game, to other species, other animals playing to learn, for instance. So yeah, play is difficult to define, and in a sense, I think it's a beautiful notion and a fascinating notion because it is so generous and so wide in the things it can refer to, in what play encompasses. And in my case, my object of study is games, and it's of course the thematic focus of the Swiss Museum of Games. So my take on play comes from an interest in game studies. That's where I'm speaking from, in a sense. And I know that within this conference later on, we will hear different perspectives on play, coming from music and theater, for instance. Right. So how do you define play? On a sort of linguistic note, the concept also varies from one language to another, right? And oftentimes you have two words that sort of work together or play together in English, for instance. You have play and game, right? So you have play as an activity you engage in, and games is the object of that activity, the games you play, right? And I think you have a similar distinction in Finnish between peli, if I'm saying that right, and leiki. Right. And other languages only have one word. So, for instance, in French, we only have the word jeu, and jeu is both the object and the activity, right? So, your jouer le jeu in French would mean playing the game. So, yeah, how do you define play? So, one option is to go back to the Dutch anthropologist called Johan Huizinga, who wrote a major book on play in 1938. And he's still considered as one of the forefathers of game studies. And Huizinga studied play in culture. He was among the first scholars to actually take play seriously. And his sort of provocative idea is that he sees play as the foundation of culture. He sees play as the cornerstone of culture. After spending a few days in Finland, I think Huizinga is wrong. I think sauna is the foundation of culture, but that's a different question. So yeah, Huizinga sees most human actions, social interactions, institutions as grounded in a form of play. We are constantly playing, in a sense, to win, right? Be it in our professional lives and sports and social events and war, it's all about play. And here you have his main definition of play, which he sees as a human activity that has to be conducted willingly. So you can't be forced to play, that relies on strict limits in space and time. So play is time-bound, localized, that relies on rules that are non-negotiable, and that produces emotions, and that we know is separate from ordinary life or real life. And Huizinga sees this as a central mode of being in culture. He sees it operating sort of everywhere. And what I find interesting in this definition, sort of classical definition of play, is this idea of play as a mode of being. Play is a specific way of connecting to the world and to connecting to others. And so it's not just about games as being rule-based objects, or it's not merely a child's activity, but it's a mode of being, a specific type of experience that we can have and that we can enjoy as humans. Some scholars also stress that games are about uncertainty, right? So when you play a game, you don't know what's going to happen, and games give you agency. It's about action. You're acting when you're playing a game. And Galloway sees video games as a medium of action. And then there's this quote by Zimmerman that I really like. This idea that games can be seen as the first historical example of an interactive system designed by humans, right? And well, if you think about it, and if you're involved perhaps in innovation today, well, interactive systems probably emerged in ancient Egypt some 5,000, 6,000 years ago with the advent of the first board games, right? And I think it's an interesting genealogy, historical lineage to sort of keep in mind when we're talking about interactive systems today. Right, so why does this matter? Play is a specific mode of being, it's a type of experience. Well, I believe that this specific mode of being has been around for thousands of years, and it is really profoundly linked to culture. And here you have an example of the oldest game board we have in our collection at the Swiss Museum of Games. It's roughly 4,000 to 5,000 years old. It comes from the Giraffe civilization. And so this piece comes from Iran and it was presumably used to play an ancestor of the backgammon game, so a game that is still played today. And it shows in a way that, you know, as far as we can look back, humans have used their skills and creativity to design and create rule-based games and play these games. And these games are very much part of our common cultural heritage. So now what about today? You know, we often hear today that games are everywhere in our society, that we live in a gaming society or a play-oriented world. And I think it makes sense, but at the same time, I find this idea a bit dubious because humans have always played, and it's something that I like to remind, right? And even if games tend to be associated with childhood, you know, it has been the case since the antiquity, actually adults have always played. In our societies, right? If you look at chess, for instance, chess has a history in Europe of over 1,000 years. Playing cards have been around for over 800 years and have been played by all social classes. In Africa, Mancala games, which are traditional board games, have a history of over 1,500 years, and they're still played up to this day. So humans have always played and adults have always played. Of course, there has been an important sort of paradigm shift at the end of the 20th century with board games and even more so video games becoming major cultural industries, right? And this is, of course, a big shift. So if you look at board games, for instance, the production of board games has greatly increased. Starting in the end of the 20th century, we've moved from classical games that everyone had and everyone played at home to a very diversified and vibrant market, right? And video games as well, right? Video games have a history of over half a century now, and they've also developed into a rich and diversified cultural field. And video games are not just about the video games that you play, but images from video games and their imaginaries really travel within culture and within the social landscape at large. And so, yeah, we've noticed a change in terms of scale of production. It is estimated that roughly 2,000 new board games reach the market every year now. And if you look at video games, that figure goes up in the tens of thousands. So in a sense, quantitatively, we are living in a play-oriented world. And something that has also changed with board games and video games is that these cultural artifacts have gained a form of cultural recognition in the past 15 years, which is also a new phenomenon for game. And then there's gamification as well, so which is also a contemporary trend within games, right? So gamification refers to this idea of bringing play elements, scoring, game mechanics, rewards into context that is not play, right? Into non-game context. This approach initially comes from marketing and business, but then it developed within research, teaching, health, citizen science. And it has been around for quite some time now, 15 years or so. And here you have two examples on the slide. One, the pictures above, is an example of a game that we designed at the Lausanne Game Lab called Lausanne 1830, which was a game designed to teach local history to teenagers in schools. So you play, it's a sort of investigation game in Lausanne set in the 19th century. And then below a game called Krobs, which was developed by a professor and a doctor in Switzerland to educate kids about microbes. So it's a game to transmit knowledge and sort of health tips to children. And it's a card game. So it also shows that, you know, you don't necessarily need fancy technology when it comes to gamification. You can also use like traditional games, like card games, for that purpose. And when we're talking about gamification, I think we can make a sort of useful distinction between two types of gamification. One type that I would call soft gamification, as opposed to deep gamification. So soft gamification would basically be this basic approach, which is about bringing scores and leaderboards and rewards to any kind of system, right? And this has normalized. Today, you find it everywhere. You find it on LinkedIn. You find it, you know, if you're using running apps, shopping apps, Facebook. You have these sort of basic mechanisms coming from game design, in a sense, implemented within systems. And the idea is that it's going to basically support customer engagement within these applications. And yeah, I think it's pretty commonplace today. And comparatively, so the other approach would be deep gamification, and that is really about trying to connect and to merge a content with a game system, right? And that's harder to do in a sense because it involves design and it involves game design. Yeah, so as an example of deep gamification, I'm showing you a few images here of a project I've worked on, which was called Portal to the Past. And it was about creating a VR experience for a museum in Switzerland, a VR sort of game within an exhibition about the local history and social history in Switzerland in different time periods within an archaeological site in Switzerland. And so in this case, we've worked with a local development studio called Digital Kingdom, video game studio, and we had a team of scientific experts, so historians, archaeologists, and game specialists. And so within the exhibition, the visitors could use the VR sets to experience these sort of mini games that took place in different time periods. And the game was designed as to encourage visitors to sort of get a sense of issues about the social history of, for instance, you know, Roman antiquity by playing a VR game. So in this case, it's not just about, you know, bringing leaderboards and rewards, but it's really about, well, using what I would call the power of play to transmit knowledge about a historical period. And that's done through immersion and embodiment. Right, moving on to the Swiss Museum of Games. So yeah, generally speaking, this is what we're trying to do at the Swiss Museum of Games, trying to use play as a tool to transmit knowledge and connect with different audiences. So a few words about the museum. It was founded in 1987, so we'll be celebrating our 40th anniversary soon. We have a collection of roughly 15,000 games covering 5,000 years of game history. So it's one of the major collections in Europe and around the world that's dedicated to game heritage. Yeah, so that's the venue. The museum is located in a castle in La Tour de Paix, which is a small town near Lausanne. It's a 1 hour drive from Geneva in Switzerland. And when I arrived in 2023, the museum was sort of losing momentum and the attendance had been slowly decreasing for 15 years. And so the goal was to articulate a new strategy for the museum. We needed a game plan, in a sense. We needed a new strategy. And so the idea has been to sort of create links between game as heritage, right? Between games from the past and the contemporary history of games, trying to bridge the gap between history and the present. So bringing in contemporary history and contemporary practices within the museum. So that, of course, implied bringing video games within the museum's scope and bringing video games within our exhibitions as heritage objects, but also as tools for mediation in the museum. And another element has been to make our exhibitions playable. And I think that is really key because if if play is a mode of experience, if play is something that you experience, a mode of being, then you need to play to understand the social and the historical importance of games, I believe. And so this has led us last year to our first major exhibition, which was called From Board to Keyboard. Right. So from board to keyboard, in many ways, this was sort of our manifest exhibition, because the core idea of our approach was really the foundation of the exhibition. So trying to create these links and connections between game heritage and contemporary history of games. And the exhibition was about reconstructing sort of game genealogies from very old games up to current games around a series of game mechanics. So really, looking at the long history of games. And I also believe it's an interesting way to find new audiences, right? Because we have people coming with an interest in heritage, and so they come into contact with heritage objects and then discover the contemporary history of games. And we also have younger audiences, teenagers, children interested in video games, and through video games, they discover the long history of games. And the exhibition was also very much playable, so we had 35 playing stations, a lot of playable video games, arcade games, but also board games and digital replicas of historical games. And the exhibition was a nice success. So it showed us that this approach sort of made sense and could allow us to connect with new audiences. In 2025, so we've launched a new exhibition called Playing Earth, which explores the links between games and the environment. So that's the exhibition we have running now. So games and nature, but also the environmental impact of playing practices is explored in the exhibition. And we've also launched a festival. And for us, it's a great way to celebrate play cultures and their diversity. So we have this festival every year in September now, second edition in 25. And we have over 40 activities within the festival. So, traditional games, outdoor games, role-playing games, video games, war games, contemporary board games. And we had over 10,000 people joining us this year. So it was a really, really nice event. And we're not just in the castle itself, but we're actually in the whole city. So it's also a nice collaboration with the city at large. Well, to conclude, when it comes to play, I personally believe that experience is key. And I believe that play is something that one experiences. It's a mode of being. And in our case at the museum, we try to transmit knowledge about play through play. So we sort of go full circle by creating various playable experiences. And this approach seems to work. And I also think that this sort of power of play, its ability to create social link, to foster creativity, to help learning, can be used in many contexts and can be a useful tool for innovation as well. Thank you.